The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Ouagadougou as Captain Ibrahim Traore stepped out of his armored vehicle. The young leader of Burkina Faso had called an emergency meeting with his closest advisors, but this time, it wasn't about military operations or political strategies. Hidden beneath a stack of classified documents was a blueprint that would change everything. Traore had been struggling with a problem that kept him awake at night. Burkina Faso was rich in gold, but getting it safely to international markets was nearly impossible. Armed groups controlled many roads, making transportation dangerous and expensive. Every convoy risked attack, and the country's economy suffered because of it. 3 months earlier, a team of Chinese engineers had approached him with an unusual proposal. They had studied the geography of West Africa and believed they could build something that had never been attempted in the region before. Their idea was bold, risky, and potentially revolutionary. Dr. Li Wei, the lead engineer, spread out detailed maps across Traore's desk. The proposed tunnel system would stretch underground for hundreds of kilometers, connecting Burkina Faso's major gold mines directly to the port of Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire. It would bypass all the dangerous overland routes completely. Traore listened carefully as Dr. Li explained the technical details. The tunnels would be deep enough to avoid detection, but shallow enough to make construction feasible. Special rail cars would transport gold shipments through the underground network, protected from bandits and rival groups. The entire journey, from mine to port, would take just 6 hours instead of the current 3 days by road. The project would cost billions of dollars, but Traore saw the potential. If successful, it would not only secure Burkina Faso's gold exports but also create thousands of jobs. The tunnel could later be expanded to transport other goods, turning the landlocked country into a major trade hub. However, the risks were enormous. The construction would have to be kept secret to prevent interference from hostile groups. Any leak could result in attacks on work sites or international pressure to stop the project. Traore knew that many powerful people would oppose such an ambitious undertaking. During that first meeting, Traore made his decision. He would approve the tunnel project, but it would proceed under the highest level of secrecy. Only a handful of trusted individuals would know the full scope of the plan. Even his own cabinet would be kept in the dark about the details. The Chinese team promised to begin preliminary surveys within 2 weeks. They would pose as researchers studying underground water sources, giving them cover to map the proposed tunnel route. Meanwhile, Traore would quietly secure funding through a network of investors who were eager to profit from Burkina Faso's gold resources. As the meeting concluded, Traore felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. He was about to embark on the most ambitious infrastructure project in West African history. Success would cement his legacy as a visionary leader who transformed his country's economy. Failure could destroy everything he had worked to build. The first phase would begin with test drilling at 3 locations along the proposed route. If the soil conditions were favorable, construction of the main tunnel would start immediately. Traore estimated that the entire project would take 5 years to complete, but even partial sections would provide immediate benefits. That evening, as Traore reviewed the tunnel blueprints one final time, he thought about the generations of Burkinabe who had struggled with poverty despite their country's vast mineral wealth. The tunnel represented more than just a transportation route. It was a pathway to prosperity and independence. He locked the documents in his personal safe and prepared for the challenges ahead. Tomorrow, he would begin the delicate process of assembling the team that would make his underground vision a reality. The project that would transform Burkina Faso forever was about to begin. 6 weeks after the initial meeting, the first drilling crews arrived in Burkina Faso, disguised as a water survey team. Dr. Li Wei had assembled a group of specialists from around the world, each chosen for their expertise and ability to work under extreme secrecy. They carried equipment labeled for groundwater research, but their real mission was far more complex. The team established their base camp near the town of Koudougou, about 100 kilometers from the capital. Local residents were told that the foreign experts were helping to locate new water sources for drought-prone communities. This cover story worked perfectly, as water scarcity was a real concern in the region. Captain Traore visited the site personally, arriving in a convoy that appeared to be conducting routine security patrols. He was amazed by the sophisticated equipment the Chinese team had brought. Massive drilling rigs capable of reaching depths of 300 meters were assembled under large tents to hide them from satellites and curious observers. The first test hole revealed promising results. The underground rock formations were stable enough to support tunnel construction, and the soil composition would allow for relatively fast digging. Dr. Li showed Traore core samples that indicated the proposed route was feasible along most of its length. However, they encountered an unexpected obstacle near the border with Côte d'Ivoire. Underground water tables in that region were more extensive than anticipated, which would require additional engineering solutions. The tunnel would need specialized waterproofing and drainage systems to prevent flooding. While the geological surveys continued, Traore focused on securing international backing for the project. He secretly met with representatives from several countries interested in gaining access to Burkina Faso's gold reserves. Russia offered military equipment in exchange for tunnel access rights. Turkey proposed joint investment through its sovereign wealth fund. The most attractive offer came from a consortium of Middle Eastern investors led by the United Arab Emirates. They were willing to provide 70% of the construction funding in exchange for long-term gold purchasing agreements. This partnership would give Burkina Faso the capital it needed while maintaining control over the tunnel operations. Meanwhile, Dr. Li's team completed surveys at 12 different locations along the proposed route. They discovered that the tunnel would pass through 3 distinct geological zones, each requiring different construction techniques. The first section near Ouagadougou could be built using standard mining methods. The middle section would need reinforced concrete lining due to softer soil conditions. The final approach to Abidjan would require specialized boring machines to penetrate harder rock formations. One morning, disaster nearly struck the project. A local journalist had noticed the unusual activity around Koudougou and began asking questions about the foreign drilling crews. He suspected that the water survey story was false and started investigating the true purpose of the operations. Traore's intelligence services quickly identified the threat. Rather than eliminate the journalist, which would attract unwanted attention, they decided on a more subtle approach. The reporter was offered an exclusive story about a genuine water project being planned for the region. He was given access to real hydrogeologists and allowed to interview government officials about drought relief efforts. The diversion worked perfectly. The journalist published a detailed article about Burkina Faso's efforts to address water shortages, completely missing the tunnel construction happening right under his nose. His report even helped reinforce the cover story that Dr. Li's team was using. By the end of the second month, the preliminary phase was complete. The Chinese engineers had mapped the entire tunnel route and identified the optimal construction strategy. They estimated that the main excavation work could begin within 6 months if funding and equipment were secured promptly. Traore approved the next phase of the project, which would involve importing massive tunnel boring machines under the guise of mining equipment for legitimate gold operations. These machines, each weighing over 1,000 tons, would be the key to completing the tunnel within the planned timeframe. The success of the geological surveys gave Traore confidence that his ambitious vision was achievable. The underground pathway that would transform Burkina Faso's economy was no longer just a dream on paper. It was becoming a concrete plan with real engineering solutions and international financial backing. As Dr. Li prepared to return to China to organize the construction equipment, he assured Traore that the most challenging phase was behind them. The tunnel project was ready to move from planning to implementation, bringing Burkina Faso one step closer to economic revolution. The massive cargo planes began arriving at Ouagadougou airport in the pre-dawn hours. Their timing carefully coordinated to avoid attention from intelligence agencies of neighboring countries. Each aircraft carried components for the tunnel boring, machines disguised as regular mining equipment, bound for Burkina Faso's expanding gold sector. Colonel Hassan Sawadogo, Traore's most trusted military commander, supervised the unloading operations personally. Every piece of equipment was immediately transported to secure storage facilities that had been constructed specifically for this purpose. The facilities were designed to look like ordinary mining supply warehouses from the outside. Dr. Li Wei had returned with a larger team of specialists, including experts in underground construction, electrical systems, and logistics. They worked around the clock to assemble the boring machines in hidden underground chambers that served as the tunnel project's headquarters. These chambers, carved into hillsides near major work sites, were invisible from satellite surveillance. The first tunnel boring machine, nicknamed Mole 1 by the construction crew, was a technological marvel. Standing 4 stories tall when fully assembled, it could excavate through solid rock at a rate of 50 meters per day. Its rotating cutting head was equipped with diamond-tipped teeth that could chew through the hardest underground formations. Traore visited the assembly site and was amazed by the scale of the operation. The machine's computer systems could automatically adjust cutting speed based on rock density, while built-in conveyor belts removed excavated material continuously. Everything was designed for efficiency and secrecy. The workforce for the tunnel project presented unique challenges. Dr. Li had recruited experienced miners and construction workers from several countries, but they all had to be vetted for loyalty and discretion. Each worker signed contracts that included severe penalties for revealing project details to unauthorized persons. Local Burkina workers were gradually integrated into the teams, but they were told they were building underground storage facilities for gold processing. Only the senior supervisors knew they were actually constructing a transportation tunnel that would stretch across international borders. Construction began simultaneously at 4 different entry points along the planned route. This strategy would accelerate completion while providing backup options if any single work site encountered problems. Each location was carefully selected for its remote geography and natural concealment opportunities. The most challenging work site was near the border with Côte d'Ivoire, where underground water posed constant flooding risks. Special pumping systems had to operate continuously to keep the tunnel dry during construction. The engineering team developed innovative waterproofing techniques using materials that had never been tested in West African conditions. Meanwhile, Traore faced increasing pressure from international observers who were suspicious about Burkina Faso's sudden increase in equipment imports and construction activity. French intelligence services began monitoring unusual shipping patterns, while American satellites detected thermal signatures consistent with large-scale underground operations. To deflect attention, Traore announced several legitimate infrastructure projects that would explain the increased construction activity. New roads, bridges, and government buildings provided perfect cover for the tunnel work happening beneath the surface. Foreign contractors working on these visible projects had no idea they were helping to conceal the most ambitious secret project in African history. The tunnel's electrical and communication systems required equally sophisticated planning. Fiber optic cables would provide high-speed data transmission throughout the entire route, while backup power systems would ensure continuous operation even during regional blackouts. Emergency ventilation fans could clear toxic gases within minutes if accidents occurred. Security measures for the completed tunnel were being planned in parallel with construction work. Access would be controlled through biometric scanners and encrypted key cards known only to authorized personnel. Hidden cameras and motion sensors would monitor every meter of the route, with alerts transmitted directly to Traore's security headquarters. After 6 months of construction, the first section of tunnel was nearing completion. The initial 15-kilometer segment would connect 2 major gold mines to a hidden processing facility, creating immediate economic benefits even before the full route was finished. Test runs using specialized railcars demonstrated that gold shipments could move through this section safely and efficiently. Dr. Li reported to Traore that construction was proceeding ahead of schedule, despite numerous challenges. The boring machines were performing better than expected in local soil conditions, and the workforce had developed excellent teamwork, despite language barriers and cultural differences. However, new complications were emerging. Intelligence reports suggested that rival armed groups were becoming suspicious about increased government activity in remote areas. Some were planning reconnaissance missions to investigate construction sites that could expose the tunnel project if not handled carefully. Traore knew that the next phase would be the most dangerous. As tunnel sections began connecting with each other, the scope of the project would become harder to conceal. He would need to accelerate construction while simultaneously strengthening security measures to protect his underground vision from those who would try to destroy it. The crisis began on a humid Tuesday morning when one of the tunnel boring machines suddenly stopped 200 meters underground. Emergency alarms echoed through the excavation chamber as Dr. Li Wei and his team rushed to assess the situation. What they discovered would threaten the entire project. The machine had encountered a massive underground cavern that wasn't shown on any geological survey. Water was pouring in from unknown sources, and the tunnel walls were showing signs of instability. Worse yet, the cavern appeared to extend far beyond their excavation site, potentially reaching areas controlled by hostile armed groups. Captain Traore received the emergency report while meeting with UAE investors who were considering additional funding for the project. He excused himself and immediately flew to the affected site by helicopter, landing at a remote airstrip that had been constructed specifically for tunnel operations. Deep underground, Traore could see the challenge for himself. The cavern was enormous, stretching beyond the reach of their most powerful lights. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like ancient spears, and the sound of rushing water suggested underground rivers that could flood the entire tunnel system if not properly controlled. Dr. Li explained that they had 3 options, each with serious drawbacks. They could reroute the tunnel around the cavern, adding months to construction time and millions to the budget. They could attempt to bridge across the cavern using advanced engineering techniques, but this would create structural weak points. Or they could explore the full extent of the cavern and potentially incorporate it into the tunnel design. While engineers debated solutions, Traore's security team discovered something even more disturbing. Local villagers had begun reporting strange sounds coming from underground, and some were investigating areas directly above the hidden construction sites. If civilians stumbled upon tunnel entrances, the entire project could be exposed to international media. The situation became more complex when satellite intelligence revealed that French military forces were conducting unusual reconnaissance flights over the border region. Their aircraft were equipped with ground-penetrating radar that could potentially detect large underground structures. Traore realized that foreign governments might already suspect the tunnel project's existence. To buy time while solving the engineering crisis, Traore authorized a bold deception operation. His forces staged a mock military exercise in the area, complete with tank movements and artillery practice. This provided perfect cover for the increased activity around tunnel sites, while discouraging civilian curiosity about underground noises. Meanwhile, Dr. Li's team worked frantically to develop a solution for the cavern obstacle. They brought in specialized equipment from China that had been used in similar situations during subway construction in major cities. The plan involved creating a massive concrete bridge that would span the cavern while maintaining the tunnel's structural integrity. The construction of this underground bridge required incredible precision. Workers had to operate in near-total darkness, suspended above a chasm that seemed to have no bottom. Special lighting systems were installed to guide the massive concrete pours that would form the bridge foundation. During this critical phase, Traore faced a new threat from within his own government. Several cabinet ministers had become suspicious about the large, unexplained expenditures and secretive construction projects. Defense Minister Ousmane Kabore began asking pointed questions about budget allocations that couldn't be satisfactorily answered without revealing the tunnel project. Traore decided to bring Kabore into the conspiracy rather than risk having him as an enemy. During a private meeting at the presidential palace, he showed the defense minister detailed plans for the tunnel system and explained its potential to revolutionize Burkina Faso's economy. Kabore was initially shocked by the scope of the project, but quickly became one of its strongest supporters. The underground bridge construction took 3 intense weeks to complete. Workers operated in shifts around the clock, with some teams spending entire days underground without seeing sunlight. The concrete structure that emerged was an engineering masterpiece, strong enough to support heavy rail traffic while spanning a cavern that was over 100 meters wide. Once the bridge was finished, tunnel construction resumed at an accelerated pace. Dr. Lee had learned from the cavern crisis and implemented new geological scanning techniques that would detect similar obstacles before the boring machines encountered them. The improved survey methods revealed several smaller caverns along the route, but these could be easily bypassed or reinforced. The first successful test run through the completed tunnel section was conducted using an unmanned rail car loaded with concrete blocks to simulate gold shipment weight. The car traveled the 50-kilometer route in just 2 hours, demonstrating that the tunnel's gradient and curves had been engineered perfectly for efficient transportation. Traore personally rode in the second test train, experiencing the underground journey that represented years of planning and construction. As the electric rail car accelerated through the illuminated tunnel, he felt a sense of accomplishment mixed with anticipation for the challenges that lay ahead. The tunnel project had survived its first major crisis, but greater tests were coming. Intelligence reports indicated that several international agencies were actively investigating Burkina Faso's mysterious construction activities. The race was now on to complete the tunnel system before external forces could intervene to stop it. With over half the route now operational, Traore knew that success was within reach. The underground pathway that would secure his country's economic future was becoming a reality, carved through African soil with determination and ingenuity that would amaze the world when the project was finally revealed. The betrayal came from an unexpected source. Marcel Ouedraogo, one of Traore's childhood friends who had been appointed as liaison with local communities, had been secretly photographing tunnel entrances and selling the images to French intelligence operatives. His gambling debts had made him vulnerable to foreign recruitment, and he saw the tunnel project as his path to financial salvation. Traore discovered the betrayal during a routine security briefing when intercepted communications revealed that detailed tunnel blueprints were circulating among several foreign intelligence agencies. The leak had occurred just as construction teams were preparing to break through the final barrier that separated Burkina Faso's tunnel from the Ivorian side of the project. The revelation devastated Traore personally, but he had no time for emotional reflection. Within hours, French President Emmanuel Macron had contacted him directly, demanding an explanation for what Paris was calling unauthorized cross-border infrastructure development. Similar calls came from other African leaders who felt threatened by the tunnel's potential to disrupt regional trade patterns. Dr. Li Wei advised immediate suspension of construction activities until the diplomatic crisis could be resolved. But Traore made a different calculation. With over 80% of the tunnel already complete, stopping now would waste years of work and billions of dollars. Instead, he decided to accelerate construction and complete the project before international pressure could force a shutdown. The final construction phase required the most dangerous work yet attempted. Teams had to excavate upward through hard rock formations to connect with receiving shafts that Ivorian partners had secretly constructed on their side of the border. The margin for error was less than 1 meter. If calculations were wrong, the tunnel sections would miss each other completely. President Alassane Ouattara of Côte d'Ivoire had quietly supported the tunnel project from its early stages, seeing it as beneficial for his country's port revenues. However, mounting international pressure forced him to publicly deny knowledge of any cross-border tunnel construction, while privately ensuring that Ivorian work crews continued their excavation. First, the breakthrough moment came at 3:47 a.m. on a humid Saturday morning. Tunnel boring machines working from both sides of the border met exactly as planned, creating the first continuous underground pathway between the two countries. Workers from Burkina Faso and Côte d'Ivoire shook hands through the opening, celebrating an engineering achievement that would have seemed impossible just 5 years earlier. However, the celebration was brief. Satellite reconnaissance had detected the unusual heat signatures and vehicle movements associated with the tunnel completion activities. European Union officials began drafting sanctions against both countries for what they termed destabilizing infrastructure development without proper international consultation. Traore knew he had limited time before external forces would move to shut down the tunnel operations. He authorized the first official gold shipment to proceed immediately. Despite incomplete safety testing and missing emergency systems, the symbolic importance of proving the tunnel's functionality outweighed the technical risks. The inaugural gold convoy consisted of 3 specially designed rail cars, carrying nearly 500 kilograms of refined gold from mines in northern Burkina Faso. The train was operated by remote control from secure command centers, with backup operators positioned at various points along the route in case of technical failures. As the golden cargo moved silently through the underground darkness, Traore monitored its progress from a command center located 150 meters below ground. Advanced tracking systems showed the train's exact position while cameras provided live video feeds from inside the tunnel. The journey that would normally take 3 days by road was completed in just under 6 hours. The gold arrived at a specially constructed facility near Abidjan's port, where it was transferred to armored vehicles for final transport to international shipping terminals. The entire operation proceeded without security incidents or technical problems, demonstrating that the tunnel system was fully operational despite ongoing construction work. News of the successful gold shipment could not be kept secret for long. Port workers in Abidjan noticed the unusual arrival procedures and began speculating about the source of the gold convoy. Within days, investigative journalists were following paper trails that led them to discover the tunnel's existence. The international reaction was swift and intense. France immediately recalled its ambassador from Ouagadougou, while the African Union called for an emergency meeting to address what it termed unilateral infrastructure development with regional implications. Several Western governments threatened economic sanctions against both Burkina Faso and Côte d'Ivoire, but Traore had anticipated this reaction and prepared his response carefully. Rather than deny the tunnel's existence, he decided to reveal the full scope of the project in a dramatic fashion that would capture global attention and build support for his vision. He scheduled a live television broadcast for the following week, promising to make an announcement that would transform not only Burkina Faso, but the entire West African region. The broadcast would originate from inside the tunnel itself, providing viewers with their first glimpse of the underground marvel that had been constructed in absolute secrecy. As preparation for the broadcast began, Traore reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The tunnel project had succeeded beyond his most optimistic expectations, but now came the greatest challenge of all, convincing the world that his underground vision represented progress rather than destabilization. For West Africa, the world watched in amazement as Captain Ibrahim Traore stepped into a brightly lit rail car 200 meters beneath the Earth's surface. International television cameras captured every detail of the tunnel that had been constructed in complete secrecy, revealing an underground transportation system that rivaled anything built in developed countries. Traore had chosen his words carefully for this historic moment. Standing in the tunnel that represented his greatest achievement, he addressed a global audience of over 100 million viewers. He explained that the project was not an act of defiance against the international community, but rather a desperate attempt to secure his country's economic survival in an increasingly hostile region. The broadcast showed the tunnel's impressive technical features: smooth concrete walls reinforced with steel, advanced LED lighting systems that automatically adjusted brightness based on train schedules, and sophisticated ventilation systems that maintained perfect air quality throughout the 400-kilometer route. Emergency exits every 2 kilometers provided multiple escape routes in case of accidents. Dr. Li Wei provided technical commentary during the broadcast, explaining how Chinese engineering expertise had been combined with local knowledge to overcome unique geological challenges. The tunnel had been constructed using environmentally friendly methods that minimized surface disruption, with all excavated material repurposed for road construction projects across Burkina Faso. The economic impact of the tunnel was already becoming apparent. Gold shipments that previously required armed convoys and took days to reach international markets could now be transported safely in hours. The cost savings were enormous, with transportation expenses reduced by over 70% compared to overland routes controlled by armed groups. But Traore's vision extended far beyond gold transportation. During the broadcast, he revealed plans to expand the tunnel system to accommodate passenger trains, creating the first high-speed rail link between landlocked West African countries and major port cities. This would transform regional trade and provide ordinary citizens with safe, affordable transportation options. International reaction to the tunnel revelation was mixed, but largely positive. While some European leaders criticized the project as destabilizing, many African nations expressed interest in similar infrastructure development. Ghana, Mali, and Niger immediately began exploring possibilities for connecting their own transportation networks to Burkina Faso's tunnel system. The economic benefits became undeniable within the first month of full operation. Burkina Faso's gold export revenues increased by 40%, as elimination of transportation risks allowed miners to access previously dangerous extraction sites. The country's credit rating improved as international investors gained confidence in the stability of its export infrastructure. Employment opportunities multiplied rapidly as the tunnel's success attracted international businesses to establish operations in Burkina Faso. Logistics companies, security firms, and technology providers created thousands of jobs for local workers who had gained valuable skills during the construction process. Entire communities that had been marginalized by insecurity suddenly found themselves at the center of a thriving economic corridor. The tunnel's success also had significant geopolitical implications. By demonstrating that African countries could complete major infrastructure projects independently, Traore had challenged assumptions about the continent's development capacity. Chinese investment in Africa increased dramatically as other nations sought to replicate the tunnel model in their own regions. Security in the tunnel zone improved dramatically as well. Armed groups that had previously controlled overland routes found their influence diminished as economic activity shifted underground. Many former fighters accepted government offers to join tunnel security forces, receiving steady employment and professional training in exchange for abandoning criminal activities. Environmental benefits exceeded expectations as reduced traffic on surface roads led to decreased air pollution and road damage. Wildlife corridors that had been disrupted by constant convoy movements began recovering, with several endangered species returning to areas they had abandoned during years of conflict. The tunnel project's success validated Traore's leadership style, which combined bold vision with careful execution. His approval ratings soared as ordinary Burkinabe saw tangible improvements in economic opportunities and national pride. The country that had been dismissed as one of Africa's poorest suddenly found itself leading continental discussions about infrastructure development. International recognition came in the form of engineering awards and invitations to share expertise with other developing nations. The tunnel was designated as one of the new wonders of Africa, attracting tourists and technical experts from around the world who wanted to see this underground marvel firsthand. Looking toward the future, Traore announced plans for Phase 2 of the tunnel project, which would extend the system to connect with similar networks being planned by neighboring countries. The ultimate vision was a continental underground transportation system that would revolutionize trade and travel across Africa. As the final scene of his historic broadcast, Traore stood at the tunnel's midpoint, exactly on the border between Burkina Faso and Côte d'Ivoire. He spoke directly to young Africans watching around the world, telling them that the tunnel proved that with determination, vision, and unity, their generation could build the infrastructure necessary to transform their continent's future. The underground pathway that had begun as a desperate solution to transportation problems had become a symbol of African innovation and independence. Ibrahim Traore's tunnel project had indeed transformed Burkina Faso forever, but its greatest impact was inspiring an entire continent to dream bigger and build bolder than ever before.